If you wouldn't mind.
I don't mind.
Thank you, Marcia.
I'm
You're
paying
a
my
lifesaver.
penance.
You did a great job last week.
Emails and texts I sent.
No, I didn't see. If you sent anything in the last few hours, I apologize. I did not see. But let me make.
Trust me, I sent many.
Okay, well, I will see them in a little bit. I'm sure. That's good. All right, so Marcia, you should be all set. And
No,
in a
you
moment,
made
just
me
make
a co-host.
Let us know tomorrow.
All right, I just want to make sure this is working.
Leah, are you supposed to be a co-host?
No, well, Leah is always. Leah, I will make you co-host just to make things easier.
Oh, no. Thank you.
No, okay, so it's just like, no. Don't you dare give it to me. I understand. It's a lot of responsibility being the co-host, you know? It's easier to just sit back, you know? Okay, looks like all the streaming stuff is working. Good Shabbos to all our streaming friends. Good Shabbos to everybody. Good Shabbos, President Ron. Good to see you. Okay, so, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's 7:30. God willing, next week we'll be in person doing all the good stuff together, but I'm happy to be back here with Candelora and Keelan over there in the corner. Hopefully you can hear us well. In a second, we're going to get started with lighting candles, and we're going to turn to Moralia, our wonderful Hebrew school teacher emeritus and director emeritus and all-around wonderful person and excellent candlelighter, I might say. So I'm just going to go ahead and start muting people, and if you'd like to follow along, the blessings are on page 120. Okay, Leah, whenever you're ready.
Baruch atah Eloi, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitanu v'litzvah, v'tzivanu, lahadlik ner, shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you, Leah. Beautifully done. Good Shabbos to you and John, the whole family. And we'll welcome everyone now to turn to page 128 in your prayer books as we begin our service with Yedid Nefesh. Page 130 as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat together at the very top of the page.
Nekan mafanam
Shiru Ladonai is on page 131 at the very beginning of the Hebrew in the middle of the page. Bottom of page 132, or Zarua, the last Hebrew paragraph at the bottom of the page. Turn now to page 134, Zamru Ladonai, beginning at the very top of the page.
Zamru Ladonai,
Page 135, Romamu, the last paragraph in Hebrew in the middle of the page. We'll turn now to page 138 for L'chadodi, and a reminder, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. L'chadodi likrat kalas b'nei Shabbat lekaveta l'chadodi likrat kalas b'nei Shabbat lekaveta Shabbat lechu b'necha, ki hi mekor haberacha b'rosh mikeder nesucha, sof ma'ase b'machshava tchila, l'chadodi likrat kalah, b'nei Shabbat So we're now to page 140 at the very top.
ארז בלבנון ישנא, שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובו משיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני צורי, ולא עוולת עמו.
We'll turn now to page 144 for the Chatzikash.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה,
אמן.
וילמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי,
בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב,
ויאמרו
אמן. יש מרבה מברך, לעולם וימי עלמיה יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קודשא בריחו, לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה.
תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמה.
ויאמרו
Amen. We turn now to the Baruch Hu on page 146. Turn now to page 148, and we'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעם ועד, כי הם אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני,
Baruch Shmo.
אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Please join me on page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ושוכבך וקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158. We'll turn now to page 161.
Understanding
page 162 at the very top, Vishamru.
Veshamru
B'nei Yisrael
et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם לדורותם. ושמרו
b'nei Yisrael
את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם לדורותם. Meini uvein bnei Israel, oti le'olam. Veshamru bnei Israel et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם לדורותם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם
בריתולם.
וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם לדורותם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בריתולם.
In a moment, we'll begin the Amidah together on page 164, and then we will continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and you can rise in body or spirit as, again, we begin together on page 164. Adonai sefatai tiftach, ufi avi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Ay, 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 loved ones and those around the world who are in need of healing. In a moment, I'll read Army Shaberach list, but I'll invite all those that are on the Zoom, if you care to share names of loved ones in our chat, and for those watching at home to simply say the names out loud or hold them in your hearts. Tonight, our community is thinking of Jim Cohn, Monique Renee Banks Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Francis Scavone, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Audrey Lubo, Chaim Leib, Robert Posner and Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chava, Deirdre Klein, Stephanie Skitt, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Batsara, Marlise Silverberg, Susan Spruce, Vegel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Batsara, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem Ben Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kosoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivya, Peretz Ben Yehuda, and Leah Bat Naomi. Of course, we'll add the names of all those that have been shared with us in the chat, and anyone that you are thinking of this evening, as the cantor will lead us in the Mishaberach on page 371. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, I don't know if I would call tonight a sermon as much as a learning opportunity, and one that actually is several weeks coming, but other things understandably kept coming up. But I wanted to talk to you actually about the fourth Israeli elections, which happened several months ago, but are coming to at least presumably some kind of conclusion, which is pretty remarkable because I have now given an introduction to the Israeli elections 4 times over the last 4 years. So if nothing else, if you knew nothing else about the state of Israel, and I hope at this point you know more than nothing, it's a complicated place, to say the very least, and its political system is equally complicated. And it is attempting, at least in its idealistic version, to be a place in which there is representation for all the various segments of Israeli society. As most governments, certainly most democratic governments, we hope that is what the outcome would ultimately be. But sometimes when you run a parliamentary system like Israel does, and you have the direct proportional voting that they do, and when you have as fractured a society as they currently have, it actually has been incredibly challenging to simply go from an election to an actual government. And so each of the last 3 instances, there was a vote, which seemed like a clear indication of where things were going, and because of the nature of coalition building, ultimately fell apart. And it seemed as if we were going in the same direction again, and a very likely chance of a 5th round of elections to come. And while nothing in Israel is done until it is done, it's probably true of most places in the world, it appears that sometime over the next several, I think it's 10 or 12 days, there's some crazy amount of time in which things could still get derailed. But assuming that nothing changes between now and that period of time, there will be a new government in Israel, and probably, and actually not probably, definitively one of the most unique, the most diverse in terms of opinion and personality, and one that has an odd potential in a way that I don't think that I ever could have possibly expected, for what I hope will be some positive changes in the future, present and future of the State of Israel. So, as with all things political, and certainly all things related to Israel, I'm going to do my very best to keep my personal feelings about the personalities and the parties, but to try to best as I can explain what ultimately has taken place over the last several weeks, and in particular over the last 72 hours. So, as we may remember from earlier times, as I've explained it, after the election, generally the party with the most number of members of Knesset gets the first opportunity to form a coalition. That's usually based upon every different group and their representatives coming to speak to the president of Israel, which, by the way, in this past week, we actually have a new president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, the son of forgetting, Lauren, you were most recently in Israel. His father was president. It's the first time that a son is the president of Israel and following. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. So ultimately speaking, a lot of change there, but each of the heads of the parties will come and speak to the president, consult with them, and say, this is the party that we want to give the first chance, this is the party that we support, and we think ultimately has the best chance of putting a coalition together. So the first round, as one might have expected, was led by the Likud, and the Likud has been, generally speaking, the largest party in most of the last elections going back quite some time. And in this particular case, they had 24.19% of the total vote, which gave them 30 seats in the 120-seat Knesset, which was a significant margin over the next largest group, which is Yesh Atid, with 17 seats. So despite the efforts, ultimately the time passed and they were unable to put the coalition together, which then transferred to Yesh Atid and to its leader, Yair Lapid, a former newscaster who many years ago got into politics, and ultimately speaking, given him several weeks in order to try to pull together a coalition of sorts. And this is where it starts to get interesting. The way that it works in coalition building in Israel is there is a lot of negotiation, and most of it centers around who gets the various portfolios of the cabinet. So much like we have in our country, there is a interior minister, a foreign minister, a treasury secretary, and so on and so forth. And each of those portfolios is generally given out to the various coalition partners, usually in accordance with the size of their party. So if you have 4 seats, presumably you're going to get less influence in the government. Presumably. However, when the math works out in such a way that you are very close but not quite there, all of a sudden the tiny parties tend to become very powerful, much more so than they should be in terms of direct proportion. And that is, in essence, what happened here. And so what was negotiated was a deal, in particular, between Yesh Atid, right, with 17 seats, and a surprising partner, a coalition partner, that is known, I think, actually these days really as the New Right, but really is the word in Hebrew Yamina. Yamina means to the right, led by a man named Naftali Bennett, and seconded by Yelet Shaked. So in this particular case, and this is where I have to dip a little bit into my own personal feelings, I will tell you that I am no fan of Naftali Bennett, nor his seconds, nor quite frankly anybody in the party or its policies. It is a very proudly nationalistic, right-wing party, and they are very clear about their positions and have been for a really long time. Not seemingly likely partnership with a center-oriented party like Yesh Atid, certainly not with a left-leaning party like Meretz. And yet, what has taken place over the last couple of weeks has been a negotiation that led to precisely that and more. And what ultimately is going to happen is that even though Yamina has only 7 seats to Yesh Atid 17, the prime ministership is going to go in a rotation, the first 2 years of which Naftali Bennett will become the prime minister of Israel, and after 2 years and several months, Yair Lapid will take over as the prime minister in a power-sharing agreement. Now again, this all assumes that this coalition will stick together for the duration of. A similar kind of promise was made by Netanyahu before to others that didn't materialize. So you never quite know exactly how it works, and because of the nature of coalitions in parliament, a government can be dissolved almost immediately if it fails to continue to have the necessary 61 votes to make up a coalition itself. So as I said, that in and of itself is quite remarkable. But then you have the addition, as I said, of the furthest left party that exists, as far as I know, that in this particular Knesset, of Meretz, also including what is referred to as New Hope, which is a group that broke off from the Likud, named Gideon Sa'ar, who was Netanyahu's second for many, many years, who started his own party, in essence, as a rejection of Netanyahu and of the Likud. Yisrael Beitenu, which is largely representative of the Russian community in Israel and almost exclusively secular. The Labor Party, which for many years was the counterbalance to the Likud, but now has shrunk over the years to a modest 7 seats. The Blue and White Party, that for a period of time was merged with the Yesh Atid into its own thing, and then separated again, which is led by Benny Gantz, a former chief of staff of the IDF. And then the most remarkable piece, which is certainly not the first time that has actually happened, but certainly the first time in my lifetime that I can recall, one of the Arab Israeli parties known as Ra'am, which in Hebrew actually means lightning. And interestingly enough, all of the parties in Israel have an abbreviation of their name, and theirs is Am. Am is basically the word for people, right? Our people. And so this party, which, to be frank, again, if you were looking at it on a spectrum of the politics, would be right-leaning. It, in essence, is made up of, if I remember correctly, it is a largely Sunni Arab group, but also very heavily populated and supported by the Bedouin communities of the south. And so for basically a very, very long period of time, no Arab parties would sit in government, largely out of protest for the lack of progress, not just on the peace accords, but also for what they see as a lack of awareness and policies in supporting the Arab communities within Israel proper, not in the territories or in Gaza. And so in this case, the Mansour Abbas, who is the leader of this party, somewhat to the chagrin of other people in his party, decided to engage for the first time and met with Netanyahu first and ultimately met with Bennett and with Yair Lapid, and ultimately struck a deal to be part of the coalition. And as I said, it's not the first time in Israeli history. It's being misreported that that's the case. But it is certainly the first time in a very long time. And to my awareness, it is the first time in which you have what is otherwise really considered a conservative political party within the Arab Islamic movement. And yet they are now part, conceivably, of the next Israeli government. Now, all of this said, there is a tremendous amount of potential and even a tremendous amount of optimism that can come from a group of people as diverse as this, all deciding what they are calling themselves is a change coalition. Right? They are looking at the situation that has been really stagnating in Israel for many years, looking at many of the problems that have not been dealt with because there has not been a functioning government in that period of time, certainly at the existential and the internal threats that exist within the country and its existence going forward. And everyone in this change block basically said, we still have many, many, many differences, many disagreements, many things that we probably can't overcome. But there are enough overlapping principles, there are enough overlapping concerns that they can work together along the principles of what can be done, and they will ultimately have to reconcile when there are situations in which there is major disagreement. So it makes it certainly an unstable coalition in many ways, but in other ways, the most promising coalition that I have seen in some time, largely because it represents everything, as I said, from the furthest left, really to almost the furthest right, all sitting together in a coalition. Now, I should just also point out very quickly a few other firsts that exist if this really does come through, and the first is going to shock you. Naftali Bennett will actually be the first religiously observant kippah-wearing prime minister in the history of the state of Israel. So you may be surprised by that fact. I certainly was, but if you go back and you really think about it, it's actually fairly accurate. He is a practicing modern Orthodox resident, ultimately, of the territories in the settlements. Now, he also will be the first leader to ever represent the smallest faction ever to appoint the prime minister, again with only 7 spaces and MKs, members of Knesset. It's the first time in which a faction leader who assumes the post of prime minister, being Bennett, is not the same one who actually received the mandate to form the government, being Lapid. And ultimately speaking, this is a record-breaking space for women and for the Arab population, again, in terms of ownership over portfolios in the government itself. 8 women are likely to hold ministerial portfolios from everything from the transportation minister, the interior minister, the education minister, the economy minister, the cultural minister, the social equality minister, the immigration absorption minister, and the environmental protection minister. And while none of them, I'd say, were in the top 3 of the ministries, usually those are defense and the treasury and foreign policy, it's quite remarkable to have 8 women now represented on that very, very significant cabinet. And in addition to that, there will be 8 Arab members of Knesset in the coalition as well. And although Ra'am is, again, not the first Arab party to serve in government, it's the first time that one has really played this key and significant of a role. Usually in the past, the way that it would work is they would be sort of passive participants, whereas Ra'am has decided that they want to really engage, in particular to try to get much needed attention to the Arab population living within Israel itself, in the need for financial resources, medical resources, building resources, etc. And ultimately speaking, you even have a diversity amongst Jews in terms of those that come from Ashkenazi backgrounds, Mizrahi backgrounds, Sephardi backgrounds. And ultimately speaking, it breaks the record, I think, because it has 8 factions total in the coalition. And ultimately speaking, 5 of them are headed by people who previously worked with Netanyahu and his government. So again, it's all sort of radically presented in this way. So now a last word. And this is where our portion for this week comes in. Our portion for this week is known as Shalach or Shalach Lecha, depending on where you look. And it tells the story of the spies who were sent into the land of Israel ahead of time to reconnoiter the land. And when the spies came back, 10 out of the 12 talked basically about the giants that lived in the land of Israel who would crush and defeat them should they actually enter, and therefore terrifying the people. And only 2 of the spies came back and said that actually it's a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, one of the commentators points out that actually Joshua, who is one of the spies who comes back with this report, and Kalev, his second in command, they actually saw all of the negative things that the other 10 saw. It wasn't fictitious, it wasn't made up. The 10 who saw all the bad things were accurately reporting what was going on. The difference between their report and the report of the 2 is that the 2 saw the potential. They saw the threats, they saw the challenges, but they saw the potential as being more important than all of the negative stuff. What we might refer to as a sort of, let's say, naive optimism to some degree. So I would suggest at this point, again, while politically speaking, I am more than wary over a number of the characters who are now leading and in this government and in part of it. The optimistic part of my outlook, and I think the Jewish approach to a situation like this, is not to, dissuade ourselves from the realities of the challenges, but not to also lose sight of the possibilities. And when something like this happens, which nobody would have predicted a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that you would see a coalition that looked like this, that was made up of this diverse a group of people, all deciding that while they still have their principles and their policies and their positions, that deciding that the betterment of the country as a whole is more important than any one individual or even any one individual ideology, to me is the most hopeful sign I have seen in Israeli politics in a long time. And I may end up eating my words. I may end up being wrong. Something may happen in the next 10 days and I'm going to come back next Shabbos and explain it all to you again. But that doesn't take that spark of possibility, right? It doesn't take away whatever it was that Joshua and Kalev saw, right? That possibility, even if it's ever small, of what the land of Israel really can be, to make it into a land growing and flowing with milk and honey. So with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and my hope is that all of this will actually come true. Excuse me. And with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and I'll welcome back Cantor Lauren as I get a glass of water. So we're going to turn to page 586. Aleinu l'shabeach. Any chance you could lead that?
Yes.
I'll be right back.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כאויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגואלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ היום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We begin by remembering those in our community who have passed in recent months. Miles Ambrose, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Edwin Friedman, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Lucy Gladstone, Lois Herr, Phyllis Katz, Jeanette Kopp, Madge Judith Parcher, Steve Popkin, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Paul Silver, Joan Strong Tangzilius, Virginia Tizer, Marjorie Weinberg Berman, and Ann Weiss. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Sylvia Bohm, Miriam Brandolini, Tilly Danoff, Dallas Ernst, Susan Nan Fichtelberg, Barbara Friedman, Harry Friedman, Molly Goldstein, Ruth Gonzer, Anna Harris, Irving Heller, Joab Heller, Libby Kamenkow, Beatrice Kaplan, Samuel Koffler, Peter Kump, Donald Kyle, Meyer Levine, Amy Marin, Edith Miller, Al Newberg, Bruce Norton, Morris Raff, Jerome Irwin Ridner, Richard Rube, Willard Schwartz, Louis Schwartz, Sarah Simon, Jeffrey Spanier, Sophie Tatcon, Rachel Waldman, Yenta Gitta Waldman, and Lilo Woloshin. And if you have names of anyone else for whom you're saying Kaddish tonight, you're certainly welcome to add them to the chat or hold them in your heart. And I'll invite all of those in mourning to rise in body or spirit and to join me on page 598 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. B'agala u'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav. Uyaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Zichronam livracha. May every one of their memories be for a blessing.
Amen.
All right, if you're still standing at home, you can be seated. And Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you, Cantor Lauren and Keelan, and for stepping in as soon as I had my strange coughing fit. I promise you I'm fine. And some important announcements coming up. First, of course, is to join us for Shabbat services live streamed tomorrow with myself and Cantor Lauren. And then, of course, to join us for Torah study. And as it is the first Torah study of the month, we're very excited to have our Torah study using a women's Torah commentary. And this week will be facilitated and taught by our member, Joan Price. It's going to be a great time. Again, everyone is welcome, 12 o'clock on Zoom. Also a reminder that this Sunday at 7 o'clock, we look forward to the stand-up comedy entertainment of Stone and Stone online on Zoom, followed by a Q&A with the twin performers. Again, that is 7 o'clock this Sunday. Also a reminder, Nida Mitzvah will be meeting on Zoom at 11:30 on Monday. If you're interested in joining, please contact Andrea Fagan. The Social Justice Committee will have its regular meeting at 5 o'clock, and then the Musar Practice Group with Myra is at 7 p.m. My class on Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and his book, The Prophets, is on Wednesday at 12. Later that evening, there is a board meeting at 7:30. My class on Friday morning at 9 a.m. on the Journey to the Heart of the Siddur, again, is always available for anyone who would like to join. And even if you can't make it those times, both of my classes are recorded each week. So if you're interested in the recordings, please just let me know and I'll be happy to add you. Also a reminder, Thursday, June 10th, we look forward to a guided tour of the beautiful Longhouse Reserve and Sculpture Gardens. And at least so far, the weather forecast looks good, although that is worth very little until we get very close. So, but if you haven't been to Longhouse, it's really amazing. So please do sign up for that. Also a reminder, the following Sunday, June 13th, we have a book talk with CNN's Don Lemon. And then later on in the month, a celebration of Gay Pride Month with our guest speaker, Chris Harrison, on Thursday, June 24th. As always, please keep an eye out for our e-blasts and all of our information that is on our website. If you have any questions, if you're not getting anything, please do let us know. And we'll welcome you to stick around for our virtual Oneg Shabbat, which will start as soon as our services are concluded. So before we do Kiddush, we'll turn back to Cantor Lauren and Keelan for a closing song, and we'll follow you guys.
Oh,
I'll invite you to turn to page 123, and if you have any wine or grape juice handy, to join with me. Again, page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam mahorei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava u'b'ratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishim כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו אחת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. Chaim. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Let me free you from your muting captivity. If I can just get this here. Let's go to unmute. Everybody unmute. And we'll say good Shabbat.